Finance Committee meeting to order. It's July 9th at 6:01. And here today, myself, Amy Fiden, Peter Matusko, Paul Benjamin, Shardul Parmar, and Andy Kopacki. All right, so can we just start with the minutes that I passed around? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, motion by Paul.
Second.
Second by Peter. All in favor?
Aye.
So really what we're here for is mainly we're going to be talking about the, what we're looking at, the budget, the possible override that we're talking about and that kind of stuff. So Linda and Mike can,
Year-end transfers?
oh, yeah, why don't we do that
We don't have
first?
them tonight.
Oh, you don't have year-end?
No, but, well, we will have them for next week. I think we've got to buy board with the select board
Okay,
And we're meeting
on Wednesday
before.
night. Last year, we had them early, and then we had to have the addendum because they weren't quite done. So until we have that last warrant in, which should be done by this weekend, we have a new accountant as of July 1, by the way.
Okay.
It's a return of Lori Del Olio, who we had for a few years as part of a company. She's now spun off. She's on her own now, and so we are back to her this year. So she's very familiar with us, and she can do it. And but they're just not going to be ready tonight. So I don't know if they're all aware of you're doing the buy board
Well-
next week.
well, no, we can go over, I did mention it. So when I met on Tuesday morning, I met with the financial management team, and I have a bunch of dates. Maybe we could just skip to some dates and talk about what we can do for meetings. So what we're looking at is the special town meeting we're going to have on September 9th. And so
7
going
p.m.
7 p.m.
Next.
September
That
9th will be the special town meeting.
September, okay.
September. So going up to that meeting, we are going to do four public forums. Let's see, we'll do, and 3 of them are at night and 1 of them's during the day at the Council on Aging. We can all be there. We're gonna post for all of them, but if you can't make them all, it's not a big deal. We'll have some representation, but if not, everybody has to be there on all of them. But, okay, the first public forum we have scheduled is July 29th at 6 p.m. Location to be determined, because we're gonna do some here and some, I think, maybe at the school, not sure.
That's
they're
what we
gonna-
talked about.
Yeah,
You said 6?
6 p.m. on July 29th.
Yep. For Tuesday.
August 7th at 7 p.m.
August 7th,
We have
7 p.m.
August 18th at 6 p.m.
Wow, a lot of meetings.
These are the public forums.
public forums,
Wow.
Yeah.
So people can come and learn.
And August 21st at 2 p.m. and that will be at the Council on Aging. That'll be here,
21st?
the 21st
Okay, 20th.
Thursday.
at 2.
And that time was at what, on the 21st?
2. That'll be at 2.
2.
Yeah, because that'll be especially
That
for
one's
here.
Specific for for the
Seniors.
seniors. Normally we do, that's actually the date that we do our coffee with a cop and we get really good attendance for it. So we asked if we could just switch it and have that one kind of, it's open to everyone, but we kind of wanted to have something specific for seniors.
So all those dates, those are open forum?
Open
Interesting,
forums.
okay.
Public forums,
Public forums.
questions, presentations, what to talk about it.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
You got it? All right.
Yep. Okay, so now, okay, so now for our meetings, we're looking at 3 buy board meetings. And I'm thinking instead of having another meeting with just us separately, maybe we do, because buy board meetings start at 6. So we do finance committee meetings at 5. So we only have to give up one more day, right? Instead of doing additional days. So if we have, we're looking at July 16th, finance at 6, or sorry, finance committee at 5. And then by board meeting at 6.
And
That's
gonna
July
cancel-
16th.
That's gonna cancel the 14th.
I think it should,
Right.
because
You
I
have
think,
that on your schedule.
I
That's
did,
fine.
no, I did.
yeah, it just feels like instead of doing more, if we just do it an hour before, it might be
Works for
easy.
me.
Yeah. We're giving up a lot of days, so I
Yeah.
figured if I
Well,
could,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
What's an hour earlier? Hopefully we can get
Yeah.
our discussion completed in time.
yeah. So we have enough discussion, so I figure like an hour should be good enough, hopefully. Okay. August 6th is a by-board meeting. So finance at 5, by-board at 6. August 6th.
Yep.
And August 20th. Sorry.
I can't write that fast.
But I can,
I got too big of hands to read these
I
small
can,
little
I
letters.
have them all written and I can forward them over to everyone. Jennifer, this was from
Yeah.
Jennifer, she confirmed, and so I'm reading off of her email, so
I'm
I
writing them
can,
down before I try to transcribe them.
yeah. So I'm going to, I can just forward her email too.
Yep, and they'll all be posted meetings, so they'll all be on the town calendar, so if you ever lost yours, just click on there and they'll all be up.
So 2 of these are the day before the public forums.
Yes.
Yes.
Really? Oh.
It's 8/6 and 8/20 are the day before.
Mm-hmm.
So by the 20th, you will have you'll have 3 of the public forums behind you. So when you have your by-board meeting on the 20th, hopefully we'll have some real good input from the public and you'll all be together to kind of make a decision or make decisions.
Yeah. So the by-board meetings, we're going with what the select board, because they have their meetings
Yeah.
so,
And just, Amy, just so you know, I did talk to Jennifer today, and what she has done so far is she's just made sure that she locked in this building
okay,
for all of these dates in the
Great.
event that we can't bounce around at all, but at least we'll have this place. So you'll have this room pre, and then select board in there.
Perfect.
Board in there.
thank you.
We'll try to get the library maybe for one day, the school for another date, something like that.
Okay. All right. All right, so those are our meetings. All right, so now we'll go to talk about, you want to go over any?
Yeah, I mean, as we stand right now, as Amy had mentioned, we did have our expanded financial management meeting yesterday.
It was only
It
yesterday.
felt like
Yeah.
I
a
know.
1,000 years ago.
It does.
Where we discussed a potential override. Over the course of the last several weeks, what we have been doing internally is gathering information from all the department heads. We've been meeting with them as we explained the last time we met. What we're trying to get to is with the reductions that we made to the 26 budget, the budget we're currently in 8 days into or 9 days into, whatever we are. We know that even though it is balanced, we know that we reduced it enough that in order to move into 27, we're going to have some overages. And then we also, as everyone knows, we have this fire department / EMS situation to resolve. So what we have been doing is meeting with all the department heads and asking them, okay, based upon the reductions that we made to your budget, whether it be wages or expenses, tell us what it is that you think you need and justify it to be able to continue operations. And the reason for that is to get a baseline number for a potential override. And the baseline number that we have right now with fire department and all of the rest of the town is about $950,000 for the fire side of things, the firefighters that we need in order to continue those operations, and then approximately the same amount for all of the rest of the departments in town. So it's a total of about $1.9 million. We, during the finance management team yesterday, we were exploring different options on how to approach this. We're exploring,
When you say the 1.9, you're saying per year?
we're saying we're 1.9 million, we're showing basically a $1.9 million
Annually.
annually, correct, which
Okay.
is what we would need for the override. And then Linda brought up a great point when she and I were talking today, is that as we move forward into 27, 28, with those, if it were to pass at that amount with those revenues coming in, you only have to use the override monies for what you specifically asked for that 1 year. So operationally, the town could adjust how they do any of these things after that first year, and those revenues would still come in. So as an example, I can't think of a better way to do this, but let's say that the town decided that they wanted to continue the operations of the fire department. You bring in $950,000 for those operations for that particular year. If the year after that they decided, you know what, this is a terrible idea, let's cut the fire department in half, you could still take those revenues and move them elsewhere, anywhere you want. You just simply need to use them for that purpose in year one when requesting the override. So that's what we need essentially to move forward. Now, none of this includes any additional personnel, any additional hours, any additional programs, any of that. This number is essentially what the departments need or believe they need, the department heads believe they need to continue the operations that they have to move forward. And again, we didn't get to a solid answer yesterday as far as an amount. We bounced around back and forth with some of the strategies that we discussed were, what do we think would be palatable as far as a number for the town? 1.5, would that be more palatable obviously than 1.9? We talked about when we would ask for this, if we were to ask for it, because there are risks involved in asking for certain amounts different times of the year because of how much would need to be brought in. Meaning if you ask for it in the fall, there's a high likelihood that you would need to raise that amount of money within the last 2 quarters of the year, as opposed to spreading it out over all 4 quarters. We also talked about splitting it, rather than asking for a single override of that amount, or whatever the amount is. We talked about potentially breaking the fire and EMS off and all of the rest of the town off, and then determining if we agree that all of them are valid, which one do we put in the fall, which one will we put in the spring. And then finally we addressed the discussion of the capital override portion of it that we had talked about very early on with this group, which essentially will be the payback of either our capital stabilization, our stabilization account, and or a capital account specific to buying equipment and things like that, so that you can buy things with cash instead of borrowing. My hope, our hope, is that based upon yesterday's discussion, based upon any discussion that you may have this evening, that we can give the same very brief overview to the select board next week with all of us at the table, all 10 of you, 5 and 5, and then try to make some of these decisions. Because ultimately, we can all Linda and I can do is provide you with the data. It's going to be the select board's override. They have to decide whether or not to move this forward, and the finance committee has to decide whether or not to support it, and how it's going to look. Is that pretty much the high points?
Yeah. There's A couple of things I want to clarify, and this is the process that we're going to be following, just the way, when we do the budget each year, I create the budget and work with Mike, and then ultimately, he then, we work together, but it becomes the town administrator's recommended budget to the select board. And this year, this phase of it, we're going to do it exactly the same way. We are working on the budget with each department as, in most cases, increased. Some actually are a little decreased, but the adjusted budget, I'll call it that, for each department. So we will settle on that as new figures for each department, make that recommendation. And so next Wednesday night, we hope to have that budget that we would then bring and recommend. This is the town administrator's recommended new budget or replacement budget or increased budget or whatever we end up calling it for FY '26. It then is on to Select Board and Finance Committee then to pass on it, to give their input and all. So we're just going to go through those same steps because that's the way it is. And then when the Select Board and Finance Committee have their recommendations, that will go to town meeting, just as it did in the spring. New budget will go to town meeting. And that would be, those increases would be subject to an override of so much, whatever the amount is decided to be. Then there would be a ballot question within weeks after that where where the entire town gets to go and vote on whether they want to approve the override or not. So, and if they do not, then we're back to the beginning, back to the budget that we voted in the spring. So, and the other thing I want to say about it, $1.9 million, it's not all new spending. If you remember, when we balanced the budget in the spring, we had $850,000 of that was using free cash. So that's the baseline that we have crept back up to in the last couple of years. So the first thing that we would want an override to do is to square that use of free cash, because we're not going to see it again. I guarantee we're not going to see it this round, as this week's. Because the revenues are not increasing the way they were. Some have gone down. And the spending, we're not going to have the excess in the spending because we pressed the budgets down so much. So that's sort of the flip side of having very tight budgeting, is they're going to spend that amount that you budget. When you have sort of more generous and everyone's sort of got a little cushion or a little flexibility, a little breathing room in their budgets, we tend to see very large turnbacks at the end of the year, and that's what our free cash is for going forward. So when things get tight, we sort of get double whammied in that way, that we get pressed tighter, and we cannot plan on using free cash going forward. So that's $850 of it is not new spending. The other part that is not new spending is the part that we have been paying to run the ambulance, fire and ambulance increases. Specifically the articles 3 years in a row have been to pay for the ambulance service that we running from the town.
Second call.
So, yes. So yes, the BLS, the second call service that we are running. And so that's not new spending because we have been putting out free cash in the form of an article, and then from stabilization fund. So we've been funding that for 3 years. We are to put the money into an override is to continue with funding it at this level. It's not an increase. It's not going to ALS. You all voted that a couple of weeks ago. And it's not going to be to hire more people for it. It's going to continue what we already have. So you add those two together, and we're most of the way to that override. We're just trying to get even again so that we have the money coming in that we're spending. So admittedly, there is some extra unexpected insurances that jumped up, some various things that usually happen between spring and the fall, that have always necessitated us to make an increase at the fall town meeting, which we've generally done out of free cash. But as I said, we're not counting on that this year. So in order to meet those unexpected increases, and once again, why are there increases? Because we suppressed the budgets down as low as we could. So every little thing makes a difference. If someone has budgeted their department as tight as they can, and the contractor says, oh, that's going to be, we're increasing by 10% this year or 25%, they don't have it in their budget to do it. So that's why there are going to be some increases coming forward. And so that's it. I mean, you add these together and we get up there pretty quickly. We have ways, of looking at it, that we can, the range is, we've experimented with getting it down to 1.5 million as the total ask. And if we go by all the requests from the budgets, from the departments, it's closer to 2 million, so that's why we're saying 1.9, and so somewhere in there. By next Wednesday night, we'll have that recommendation ready for you. We're still working on it, and seeing how the numbers come together. So it's a work in progress right now, which is why we're not ready to hand something over tonight, but we will for next Wednesday. We have to move this along.
Yeah, we're in a significant time crunch if we're gonna have all these public hearings and be able to present factual, data-based information to the public so that we can explain to them how we ended up here and what it is that we need to move forward. But as Linda said, the 1.9 is what the department heads are telling us that they need. If we experiment with that and let's say we get directives that say drop it to 1.5, that might be more palatable or whatever, we will then have to go back to the department heads and have them reduce those asks. And then one of the other things that we had been doing with each department head is having them kind of tell their story of, if you do not get this increase, what will happen? What will be the result of this? And so we have those stories put together as we stand, and they'll be moot if the revenue if we are able to generate the revenue. If we can only generate a portion of it, if it's decided that 1.5 isn't even going to pass, make it 1 million and figure it out from there type of thing, we'll then again have to go back to the department heads and say, okay, here's now 1 million. We're going to spread it amongst the departments that have asked for additional funding. Now retell your story as to, if you're only going to get this much, what would that mean? And so that's one of the things that we'll be bringing to the public hearings. We're going to try to utilize the public hearings to explain how we got here, tell people what it is we think we need, and then explain the potential consequences of not getting it, so that we don't end up having to parade department heads up at a special town meeting for 6 hours and have people ask every single department head those things. So that's kind of the hope, that we can get out in front of that and explain those things ahead of time.
So the question on the 1.9, is that including the 300,000 to the capital maintenance stabilization?
not.
Is that in there?
No, it is not. That
It
needs
is.
to be a separate override.
The one,
Because it's dedicated.
so is that 1.9 including the fire department?
Yes.
Yes.
At current levels.
At current levels?
At current levels and at current salaries.
What was voted the other
Yeah.
day when we said
So it's including it's including everything but the
With the
stabilization?
second.
BLS,
With the
what was,
second.
with what was voted a couple of weeks ago, the
BLS.
BLS service, second calls, staffing stays, everything stays exactly the same, and it includes the entire town. Everything needed that we're aware of anyways, besides the capital stabilization.
And really, that's half the budget, half the override.
Almost exactly.
Yeah, it's almost exact, yeah, it is.
Okay. I asked during it whether there were expenses right now at our current level that are really part of our move to an ALS
Mhm.
prior to the decision to stop.
Mhm.
And it was discussed that there might be a couple $100,000 of that money might be able to be shaved off because our expenses could go down
Yes.
in terms of training and some other
Yes.
issues.
The issue with the expense lines, Linda is working out with Mike as we speak.
Okay.
Essentially, she's made some reductions and they're having those talks. The issue with wages is much more difficult to
Yes,
solve.
understood.
We can't lay people off
no, of
because
course
it's a
not.
higher rate, and then
Right,
Yeah.
no, of course not.
And what's our free cash situation? In terms of, has it been certified? Has
Oh,
been certified?
it's gonna take a while. The end of the year really always takes a while because we have until halfway through July for the last spending for '25. So we're not going to have the expenditure figures until after those last warrants are done. And a lot of the annual revenue figures also lag at the end of each quarter. They lag, actually. So we will have the revenue and expenditure figures for FY '25 probably at the end of July. Now, that's not the only thing that goes into coming up with the free cash. There's a lot of else that goes on with the accountant, and she's just started, and
Understood.
so it's going to take a while. She's aware of this timeline that we're working under, and hopefully we, at the very least, we work to have free cash figures for the fall town meeting. So
Yeah.
we hope to have good estimates for this town meeting. My recommendation for usage of free cash at this town meeting is none. We do not use free cash at this meeting. So let's say we have a budget and we still needs to increase somewhat from, like I said, various things, an insurance line item, and it turns out we just need an extra 10 or 15,000 for it. If we go and have this special town meeting in September, followed by an override that does not pass, and then we're back to the spring town meeting, what was voted, but we still have to make some of those adjustments, then we will do that at the normal October special town meeting. So we will have a second chance to make adjustments to it within the actual free cash allowance that we have. Keeping in mind that we will not have as much free cash as usual, and use of free cash then is really going to impact our planning for '27. So we will be like immediately going underway to look to see how things, if we're looking at not having an override and needing to make adjustments into '27, we need to make those adjustments in '26. We can't wait.
I guess my question is more to do with, I would like to see from last fiscal year, which departments were under budget or over budget? Like seeing, like,
That's available, that will be available.
what, is that available, will that be available before the end of the month, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's part of getting that last warrant in, which shows all the expenditures, and then as soon as that's all in, that part does not depend on these other adjustments that I was
Right,
talking about.
exactly.
So that'll be a fixed figure then, the expenditures from every department
Yeah.
through 25, yes.
Yeah, because I'd love to see exactly, the amount of what they were budgeted, what they actually used, and
Right.
then what they're asking for.
Mhm.
And so it's just to get it,
Right.
I think just to get an idea of, where is this free cash, outside of revenues, in terms of, but, not using your entire budget, or surpluses, budget surpluses. Who's contributing to, and where is this actually coming from?
Mhm.
And-
Rollbacks.
Huh?
Rollbacks from
Yeah.
each budget is what
Yeah,
you want to see.
on
Yeah, because then, I guess my feeling is that, okay, and we should, I don't know if this is something that we could at least pull maybe the last couple years or 3 years, just to see if we can see a trend. I understand going
Right.
forward, some of these increases and new requests have more to do with these salary increases and things that, or insurance or so on and so forth, depending on whose budget we're looking at. But I really like to see, okay, are people exhausting their budget year over year?
Right.
Or are they, because what are they really asking for?
So one thing that we've done differently in the last few years, I think going back like the last 3 or 4 years, at one time it was what was the budget this year, and then the amount that was allocated, and then for preparing the next year's budget, you start with what was allocated last year, and you go up and down. What we started doing is, what did you spend last year?
Yes, exactly.
Is it one of those things where if you don't use it, do you lose it? What type of situations where it's like, okay, if you only have a 1.7 budget and you only use 1.3, well, that 400,000 is gonna, we're not gonna give it to you, it's gonna go somewhere else, well, I might as well spend it on something else, because we want that money coming back in.
We deliberately, and this started with Carolyn, made it a very clear message that no one's gonna be punished for turning money back in. It just can't be, because we need
No.
that money. But this is what Peter is asking, and it's very, I mean, this is human nature, is like, if I don't use it, it looks like I don't need it. And then when I ask for it next year, they'll say, well, you didn't need it last year. So, I mean, it's a starting place, and maybe we all come in it with our own assumptions, but there's a story behind every one. One might be,
Timing.
it took 4 months to replace this
Yeah.
highly priced
Well, I mean, you know-
employee, and that
When
won't
we-
happen again.
When people are asked to start to put together a budget 6 months into the budget cycle, and so it's this delicate dance where one of the things that Linda does is she will bring in, and we'll go line by line, but she'll bring in that 6-month spending.
Yep.
And so if you've only spent 15% of this line item that you have, she basically says, well, maybe you don't need all of this money. And then it's up to the department head to then argue and say, well, technically, this is usually the time of year, like, I'll use Scott as an example. I usually paint lines during spring or whatever it is. So I don't spend that money until we hit this point. And so it's this delicate dance, but the idea of that is,
But if you're
it's a starting
averaging,
point.
if you're averaging giving back.
Absolutely, right.
For the
Yeah.
last 3 years, if a department is averaging giving back some amount of money.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this override, and we can say, I think you can use the trailing data to go and say,
Certainly.
look, you know what? You're asking for this, out of this 1.9, your line item out of the budget, that's that 1.9, you know what? There's 80,000 that you've been averaging the last 3 years that you've been giving back. Maybe we take some of that. We take some of that away from your future, from this override.
Yeah.
And you,
Yes.
It's a good point.
You start doing that, and then you trim it down, and maybe it's that 1.9, like you said, gets down to 1.5, or somewhere. Somewhere. I just feel like going forward, we want to make sure that we're not going and creating, because like Peter says, we don't want to go and create a situation where we're clawing back. People, like, you're giving back this money because you're going to spend it, but you also don't want to escalate and raise the bar, raise that budget every single year.
Yeah, right, which is-
And then when we get into the situation where you said about free cash, where, realistically, from what I've read about free cash and using free cash, it's not always the best practice for municipalities.
And we like to get out of that, but I'll tell you what it's very difficult when you're elected to say, and this is why we didn't do an override in the spring, to say in the spring, we need a $750,000, we need $1 million override, or else we're having to make this cut and this cut and this cut and all these cuts. And then you do the override and it doesn't pass, and then you get $1 million in free cash, and you go, oops, we want to be accurate.
Right.
We want to be able to stand by our numbers.
Yeah, we've lived through that.
There's someone who remembers.
I've been around long enough to remember that one.
I was in North Hampton when that
You
happened.
can bring your own
Back
pencils
in
to school.
1981.
Yeah.
But I do agree with, Shardul's point of having a multi-year look back, because it's hard to look at 1 year back.
Yep.
Every time we're looking back at these budgets, it's good to have a greater depth, just so you can see trends. And granted, the
Yep.
department's situation certainly may have changed, obviously, with the fire department. That's the case. But if you're looking at, they had a one-time large growth, we can't expect that trend to continue. We're all gonna be in trouble.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, and we'll see trends like that across the town, that we have had more rapid, in the last few years, because of having gone through COVID, delay hirings, delay expanding, delay raises, and then whoop, at some point that was compensated for. We don't see it continuing like that. We're at a point where we need to level this out, fresh start. Let's get back to where we were. I mean, at a very minimum, could we fill that $850,000 hole that we are living with?
What does the 1.8 look or 1.9 rather, represent as a percentage of the increase to the tax base?
Is that
Oh,
like,
help, I didn't bring those. I didn't.
well, we had,
I
we were
mean, the
just-
total tax base is what, 16 million? Around from
15, low 15, low
You're
15.
talking about real estate taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so we can
Average
do this.
household taxes, it would be nice to,
So-
you know, I mean, it'd be nice to know what,
So if we're
what the real
raising-
estate tax,
To raise that 15
10%.
million by 10% is $1.5 million, raising it 10%. Does that mean 10% on every, maybe?
yeah. so
That's
it's
pretty
about-
accurate,
That's
actually.
pretty accurate.
That's a good,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's 10%.
yeah, 10%.
Yeah. The other thing I will say about the free cash, just to finish that thought, is that I think our departments have been great at not going and spending for the sake of spending, based on all the free cash we have received in the years past. So I do.
Right.
I do think that the departments are working in good faith and not blowing their budgets every year for the sake of blowing their budgets based on all the returns. But I do feel that there is, for me, I'm just speaking for myself, I do feel like there's sounds a little bit of a panic on some of these departments in terms of asking for certain money, because of the
Yeah.
scale, 10% is, and we understand the last 2-3 years, inflation's been even greater than that, I think, compounded, so.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's understandable.
10%'s 1.5, and if you're looking at
1.9.
1.9,
Right.
let's not sugarcoat it. Yeah, you're looking at.
But I mean, in fact, we've been
12.5,
funding
yeah,
this,
15,
we've been
yeah.
funding this already through free cash and stabilization.
Stabilization, yeah.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think there's, I understand what you're saying. I'm not sensing a lot of panic spending, the town side
No,
of it is.
budgeting.
Panic,
Panic budgeting.
Yeah.
I should
Well,
say.
Yeah.
it's like one thing leads to another. Let's start with your reserve, which was at one point $80,000, and now $20,000, and everybody now knows I have less of a backup. I have less backing me up if I go wrong. I better make sure my budget is up maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And this year, definitely more so than other years. In June, with departments concerned about the 26th and what's going to happen next, they were making more of an effort to get their expenditures into 25, and that these are not unnecessary expenditures. They're expenditures where maybe in another year where they would have said, well, I'm busy, we'll do that in July or August instead. So there is that, certainly that level of concern that but like I said, one thing leads to another. Once you start tamping down, it pops up somewhere else, and you start maybe losing the balance that we had the year before.
And then you have the uncontrollables that pop in, like, the insurance increases and all
Mandates.
the other stuff, right?
Mandates.
Is this a simple majority or a supermajority?
We haven't even dug into the rules of how to get that, of how this
Gosh, I
works.
should know that. It's been so long.
Yeah, I know, it's been
Well, I don't know.
Good question.
I don't know that we have.
Well,
If anyone's listening.
The,
Wow.
and also just to clarify, you had talked about the capital fund. And I'm getting the sense that you're pushing the building maintenance fund into that too, any
Yes.
increases of that into the capital fund? I just,
Yes.
I'd hate to see, obviously you blow a compressor, what have you, that's, that type of thing, but, we still have obviously compression on the overall maintenance budget. Just for keeping up the buildings, let alone replacing large capital items that have failed.
Well, they'll need to keep the maintenance budget because this capital maintenance reserve will have to go through town meeting. It'll be for special things. It won't be for everyday maintenance.
Yeah.
Because they'll have to have something in the regular budget so that they can use it year round.
We still have the building maintenance budget.
Right.
You're talking larger
Larger.
maintenance.
Yeah, it'll be for-
Painting or
Yeah.
something like that. It's not
Yeah,
something you
for-
do every year. Replacing a
Right.
roof, not something you do every year. But, is it a capital expenditure? At some
Yeah.
point, like we've talked about, this should be planned and built
Yeah.
into the budget because these expenses are coming.
Right.
Yeah.
And who's on
Yeah.
capital here? Are you,
Paul.
one or two of you? One? Just one? Yeah.
Yeah. There's still, I mean, that part of it is still kind of up in the air and up for discussion. You know,
Yeah.
we had originally talked, and we talked about 300,000 or something along
Right.
those lines, but then we had discussed, and I know part of it was, do we split it? We still want to pay back our, you know, we had made promises to the town that going down the road with this ambulance, we would be paying that stabilization back, and we know at this point that's not going to be a reality anymore. So we had talked about, maybe we split this capital and we put 150 into capital stabilization for painting and maintenance and things like that. And then 150 to go directly into our actual stabilization to begin to build that back up to where it is, because we started with 4 a couple of years ago. It was around, and we're down to 1.7.
Yes. No, we weren't at 4.
No,
No, we were like.
3.5?
2.2. No. We weren't up there.
Under 3.
It was under 3.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was just a bit, like, I think maybe we're up to 2.2.
So we're at 1.7 now, so it would be nice to get some back into there. But
Yeah.
you're right, we do need, like, major projects and things like that. Would be great to not have to borrow.
Generators. things like that.
So our thoughts on
Sorry.
that particular ballot question is that we would put that one off till spring and have it part of the town elections. The amount of it would then be determined by a few things. Well, the reason we want to put it off till spring is the impact of it will hit for '27 on people's tax bills. So we'll already know whether this override passed. So that might mean we would keep the capital one at a certain level. If this one doesn't pass, maybe we might want to adjust that and do something different for the capital override. I don't know, but I don't know. There's just so many pieces that we're trying to have come together at once, and we have some pretty big unknowns out here right now.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to come up with the best budget and the best plan to keep the town running as it is, and see if that's what the people want.
So I think we should ask the rest of what they think also about splitting it from the other thought that was talked about, because they don't want to have all the taxes have to be brought up in just 2 quarters. So they're looking to split it, and they wanted to push off not just the capital item off to the spring, they also wanted to push off the fire off to the spring.
Or the other way around.
The other way,
Or
either
the
way,
town, you
yeah.
know, it could go either way.
If the amounts are the same, right?
The amounts are the same, but the problem.
impact is different.
So the linchpin to that discussion is if you do the fire first, then if it passes, you save the fire department, and then you can, as it is, and then you worry about the rest of the town in the fall. But again, splitting it, you're now risking, I just got a big increase to my tax bill, and now you want me to do it again. Now granted, we advertise it that way. Please understand that we're gonna be asking for this in the fall and this in the spring. The problem with doing it the other way and putting the fire in the spring and the rest of the town in the fall is that the amounts are essentially the same, but there's no way to get the fire department from here to there without using more stabilization. You have no pot of money, and we are out of money for the fire department at the end of October.
The ambulance portion of it.
The ambulance
yeah.
portion of it, which includes likely 4 to 5 firefighters. And so you can't necessarily do it that way without utilizing stabilization, and we know that that's not palatable to most of the select board and most of the finance committee generally, as far as just the conversations that I've had. So you could do it that way, but then again, the linchpin is you must use stabilization to carry them between October and June 30th.
I don't know, I don't want to use the word gimmicky, but it came out. But I think that if you're going to face the reality of this, and
You just do it.
you do it in this, because it's still more or less applying to the same fiscal year. And, we're not just doing it a little bit because, what happens if you get half and not the other half? And
Right.
then, you're part of the way there, and now you're gonna have to make a different set of tough decisions.
Yep.
True. Well, it's consistent, though, with the effort that we've had for the last few years doing capital, that we're trying to keep tax rates from going like this. And if you vote the full amount now and you have, and they spike for the second half of the year, and then they'll go down for the next year. It was just trying to keep things even going through.
If they go
But
back
if
down, I
it-
don't
if
think
it
anybody's gonna be
strikes-
upset.
You have to,
It would go
you have to live with.
But you're
Let me
right,
tell
you're
you.
right, Andy.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of how I
It would go
felt
down.
about
No,
it as
would
well.
because
All right.
the increases would
I always,
be
I
in two
just,
bills
I don't
this year.
even really know how to
The
say it. I
increase
just
next year
felt
would
like
be spread out over.
we're all in this
Oh, I see.
together.
It'll stay the same.
Type
It'll
of,
stay the
type of
same.
argument,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
We're talking about staff
That's
across,
perception
across
of
the
it.
entire town. Ask for what you need, make sure that you can prove it, and ask for it all together.
That's right.
And again, you know, like you said, let's say you did split it, and let's just say a miracle happened and everybody changed their mind and said, let's use, you know, $400,000 of stabilization to carry the fire department, and we ask for the town, or the rest of the town now to not have it all hit in 2 quarters, and we ask for the fire department then what happens if you get a yes the first time around and a no the second time around? Now you lose half your fire department. Irregardless of the, I can't believe I just said that, that's not a word, that's a pet peeve of mine. Regardless of whether or not you kept your, you know, your taxes from doing that jump, like Linda was saying. So that was one of the things that we did discuss, though. And it's important that it is an option.
I think honestly, having visual representations of these would be important at the public forums
Yep.
of the tax rate changes.
Yep.
A lot of people, you could talk numbers to them, but you show them a picture.
So one of the things that we had planned on doing is Linda, granted, as soon as we figure all this stuff out, one of the things that she is going to try to put together as best she can, because we still don't have numbers for '25, is kind of a 3-year projection based upon if we don't get the override, meaning showing what your projected revenues and your projected expenses are moving forward for 3 years. Now, couple that with what we were just discussing and showing previous 3 years of spending. How much are you spending? How much are we rolling back? How much free cash do we have to utilize each year? I would hope that that would give folks a good picture of how we've been operating and what it looks like if we continue to operate in that manner. That's one of the things that we're trying to put together. But again, a lot of it depends on these decisions that are coming up in the next week or two.
If there's no override, which I know, wasn't there a couple years ago, there was a raise in the assessments of our properties? Because I know they've gone up, and I'm hoping that something like that, where you're gonna say, well, we're not gonna raise your taxes, but we're gonna raise your assessment value on your properties. Because I noticed that on my house, I was looking at this, and I'm like, wow, I don't even plan on selling my house, and it went up an extra $50,000 to a tax where people are gonna say, it's not a tax, but really, it's a fee for, I don't plan on selling, but nothing's changed on water, fire, police, that, but, you know, that's what I would also be
Now, that
worried
would
about
be-
too, that you would, you know, that the town would think about doing too, is like, well, if we're not gonna raise taxes, we're gonna raise our assessment values up.
That would be gimmicky.
Well,
That would be gimmicky.
well, this is what I have, you have to
not.
bring that up,
Let me tell
because,
you, it's
not
because you have to think of all
Yeah,
those
it's been
things,
discussed.
how is the town gonna go
Okay.
about and do
Yeah.
that? So I just, if you don't bring it up,
It's a
then,
good question, has not been discussed. We're
But
not-
I can answer it, though. It's not possible to do that. It's possible on particular property, but there's a certain amount that we can raise in taxes every year. So let's say right now it's 15 million. Next year, because of Prop 2.5, how many decades ago, next year we can raise 15 million plus 2.5%, plus new growth. So a new building goes in, we get to increase it by that amount. You may see in a year your property value go up or down, and your tax bill go up and down accordingly because you just added a wing on, or your neighbors did, and that affected your value, and someone else in town is experiencing the opposite. Even if your tax bill goes up and your whole neighborhood's tax bills go up, the town isn't raising any more money. Somebody else's is going down. You see what I mean? It's a pool, it's a pie. It's a pool of money, or whatever we want to call it. There's a certain amount we can raise, and we're capped at that plus the 2.5 unless we vote for an override. It doesn't necessarily translate perfectly to every single household or business.
That's why you see the rate go, sometimes even goes down. The rate goes down because the rate
That's
fluctuates.
That's right. Right, it'd be nice if we could just keep that.
So-
yeah.
Well, the rate
So-
and the
Do- do-
valuation.
Because
You know what I'm saying?
we
Good,
talk
yeah.
about an override, so our taxes are 11.63 per thousand. I just looked it up. Now, when everybody's talking about an override, it is the potential of 2.5%, which the most that the state would allow to our taxes. So what is that to numbers wise? We all talk about an override of 2.5%. What is that as to our tax rate per thousand, I guess, because I guess I'm kind of messing up with the numbers. Are we talking about 2.5% of the 11.63 for, that's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to
right.
figure out, a base number wise.
Good questions.
The override would basically be you're adding a dollar, let's say, $1.20.
So $1.20 to our,
So it's 11.70.
It's above the 2.5, because the 2.5 is a given in the state.
Yeah,
Right.
the two and a half is that's a minimum. So
So-
that's our base.
That's why it's
That's
an
a maximum.
override, we're going beyond the 2.5.
right.
So it's 10% of that.
So it would be, okay, another $1.20, so that's
So
almost.
I can bring you, there's literally a spreadsheet that DOR, you
gonna be
can
about
do,
$13.
and it's personalized. You can select your city.
Right.
And it'll bring up your tax rate, and it'll bring up all that, and then you can literally put in the exact number that you're looking for in an override. It'll show you your new tax rate, and it'll actually show you an annual payment for the average household income. I can bring all that. I apologize that I didn't.
But you know what I'm talking about? It's easy to say a
100%.
2.5%, but
Yes.
what is that to our property taxes? How much more would it go up? So
10%.
so it'd be
Well,
10%.
10, it's probably closer to 15,
Yeah.
but, if it's
So it could
11.
be almost
yeah,
potentially up to
yeah.
13,
Yeah.
More than 13.
more
It'll
than
be- It'll
13.
end up being more than 13. It'll be 13 and a half, or somewhere 13 and a half.
And Northampton's is not even 14.
Right.
So
but
we're
they-
gonna be-
They did a revaluation that
Yeah,
increased
yeah.
what they were bringing in a couple years ago, so
It's-
their
yeah,
rate.
it's-
they
And I know
depressed their-
population-wise, they've
Right.
got,
It's rate and
ton more.
valuation, so I think sharing that URL, if there
I
is
think
one,
that's,
that would be-
yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
because
that's,
we're-
we'll have that at forums
If
too.
their property values
Set
have
up a
gone
little
down,
laptop
the
station.
rate will go up to balance that off.
right,
But they've
We
had
we
the
have to
opposite.
compare ourselves to other areas that are like ourselves.
right.
Our population, our commercial base, all those other things that we have. And it's hard because there's not a lot of places like Hadley that you can compare yourselves to. Relative to most other places, we're still, overall taxes are still lower than most other places.
Yeah, what you pay at the very end, I mean, you could have a lower rate, but your valuation, like Sherburne or something like that, is so high that you're paying a lot more money in taxes.
I was actually at a conference about a month ago at the Vineyard, and we were talking, and I was talking with some of the chiefs that were from our area, and we were talking about who likely had the lowest tax rate, and one of the guys who was out in that area said that theirs was 2.25 or something
Yeah,
like that.
Wellfleet
And I
is
said,
like, that's like Wellfleet.
I said, there's no chance that you have any idea what you're talking about. Like, there's no way it's 225. And he said, oh no, and he looked it up and he showed me. Because they're paying on $1 million homes, you know what I mean, $2 million homes.
You
that's
can
how-
brag about having the
Wellfleet.
lowest tax rate.
Yeah.
So wait a minute, where
Yeah,
was,
exactly, no one
where
better be
did, where
saying
did you
that.
go?
That's what
Sounds
Wellfleet
like a
is,
nice
it's like
trip.
$2 or $3.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah.
But yeah, it's incredible that, some of them, based upon their valuation and what they're paying in taxes, they are able to keep it low like that.
Now, were there any projections as to knowing of the increase of the food tax and the room tax? Has that been thought of as to the point of this 1.9? Or has that been added to it? Or
We haven't done any of the, any adding to it or subtracting from it.
projecting of what it could be?
Yeah, I mean, the projections were that there's a possibility it could bring in
$500,000.
$500,000.
That's
Okay.
what I
And
remember.
so.
But you know what, I'm just trying to think, that's,
100%.
those
It's out of
numbers have
our-
been thought
And
of.
it's
It's out
just
of
so
our
totally
control.
out of our control.
Well, we don't
that
know.
We don't know
Understand.
how to calculate it in. The only thing that has happened so far is that we passed it presumptively at town meeting. It has gone to the Attorney General's office, and they have essentially said, we understand what you're asking for, but because the legislature hasn't passed it yet, we are pausing this. If and when they pass it, we will then reassess it. So we think everything will go through, but it's a matter of our legislators
When will
actually
it?
passing it. And, you know.
Yep.
So the second it passes, we'll be able to begin collecting it, and again, like you said, 500,000 would be great.
Right.
But I don't know how we can build it in if we don't know if it's even gonna happen.
Okay.
But good
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
So, so those are the questions that we're gonna be talking
Yeah,
about, the dollar amounts and when.
Right. And I will send everyone that override calculator with some instructions on how to work it. And you can mess around with it, because I've been messing around with it for a month now. So you can type in anything you want.
And the
Is there, is it, so you're gonna send it to us, is it an Excel that we can?
It's a literal
It's a
worksheet
link.
calculator. It's a link.
I
And you
saw
can
it.
type
It's a
in-
link,
you-
okay.
It's a
Yeah.
drop down with every city and town in the state. You select Hadley. It brings
Okay.
up all the accurate numbers, and then you can type in the amount needed.
Yeah.
And then it will
It's just like-
recalculate for
It's
you.
like
It's really cool.
figuring out
It's
mortgages.
Right, your interest
Put in
rates
the
on your
rate,
house is
I
right,
need to borrow
right, just like that.
It's a great,
Yeah.
it's a great
Yeah.
tool.
It's just one of those little
Okay.
I think they
things.
had it at a select board meeting.
I brought it
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to one of the
Some
select board
printouts.
meetings.
Yeah.
I did. I didn't realize
remember
Peter was
playing
gonna
around with
ask
it.
again, and I should have brought
When
it.
we moved here.
The last, my last request, and I've had many today, so, would be, for the departments, I guess, you know, you said story. I would love to have really details of exactly what, let's say, if this doesn't pass, or a reduction in the budget, what is it, what is the nuts and bolts, the real detail of, like, whether it's FTEs, services, very, very specific. I don't, you know, I don't want to, I would not like to hear, like, well, this, you know, this might be delayed by 30 seconds. You know what I mean?
I totally understand what you mean, and before I came over here, one of the things that I have been working on is laying out those types of things. You know, what I had said earlier, which is the timeline plan, the ask and how much we need, and then the consequences, so to speak, and then we'll build the stories into there. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and I started to write, for example, if I were to lose my administrative assistant, that would mean that I would have no one to handle any of our invoices, I would have no one to handle any of our mailings.
Well, what does that
And
mean?
so
Well, like, what's the substance of that? I understand. Like,
That's right.
Like to me, I get it. Like there's definitely a operational pain
Mhm.
associated with that.
Right.
But what does it mean to, like, the Hadley citizen to
Right.
to
Yeah.
you know, whether it's you or the
Well,
library
Right, so
or
something
DPW?
like if we had to lay off all the administrative assistants or assistant to the department head in town hall, there's a high likelihood that the operations would change as such. They would not be able to meet and greet with the public 40 hours a week like they can right now. There would be a likelihood that certain offices would have to close, and we would have to figure out a way to either automate certain systems or put your tax payments in the box outside and things like that. We're already thinking about those kinds of things, and those are part of some of the town hall office stories, so to speak, that if they were to lose the other person in their office or their assistant or whatever it is, we wouldn't be able to serve the public face to face in the face to face manner that they're doing right now. Library, they may have to alter their hours. COA may have to cancel some programming.
But see, when you say they may have to, I want to know. I would like to see, like, we're going to have to alter our hours by, you know, Saturdays. We can't do Saturdays, or we're on Fridays, or you know, on Thursdays,
Yeah.
or some day that we're staying later until 7. We're going to have to close.
Mhm.
Like,
Yep,
you-
some
you
of
see-
yep,
you
some
see
of
what
the
I'm saying?
departments
or if,
are
like,
very specific like
or, you know,
that.
the collection, you know, the collection, you know, that they're gonna have to close the collection office one day a week because they can't, like you said, they're not forward facing. That door is not going to be open.
Right.
There's going to be work being done, possibly, not possibly, I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
Hope so.
I would hope
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, that person might not be there because the hours are cut. That's what,
True.
Yeah.
that's what I.
That's
Yeah, good
part of
point.
what we've been trying to get at.
And because I don't want to hear, I don't want to go into talking to people about maybes.
I know.
Well-
The only thing that,
I know
the
it's
only
not- I know
problem
it's
that
not-
arises
Yeah.
is that,
We don't want to be
you know,
scary.
Right.
No, we don't want to be scary,
we
but
also-
I think I would like to know, and I think the town should know, okay, what services, because there's two sides to this. There's people who are going to value certain services, and then there are going to be people who say, well, that's not going to impact, I use Unipay. I don't go,
Absolutely.
Me too.
But here's where the maybe comes in. The maybe has to work into the argument because if the override doesn't pass and we have to find a way to cut $1.9 million out of the budget, and the select board decides it's only coming from non-essential places, well, the DPW's story at that point doesn't matter because their select board's gonna say, no, we're not laying off anyone from DPW, we need our roads plowed. Whereas if we're going evenly across all town departments and we gotta cut $1.9 million, he may be losing 2 staff members. And at that point, his story is, I now have 3 people
I
who
think
can
it has.
plow the roads.
I think it has more to do with what the budget that we're passing, that had been passed, and the extra ask, and really what that difference is. Because, and I don't want to go and say that that's going to be. It's not a binary. We're going to pass an override. We're not going to pass an override. I would like to know that better. So I think at least the members of the finance committee can so better say, okay, if we're dealing with this level of pain, what is this pain worth to us? And can we take that 1.9 and make it into, the pain is tolerable, that we can push it down to some other lesser number.
Okay.
That's because I think you're 100% right. I don't want to be I don't want it to be nebulous, so that it's 1.9 and somebody comes and tells us a story with no real consequence. You have specific, detailed, substantive consequence, not just kind of story. Things that are nice to hear about.
So if I understand you, I'm sorry. Linda.
No, I've got thoughts
The
too. You go.
fire department, if the override doesn't pass and the fire department doesn't get their money, you want to hear from the fire chief that he no longer has the money in his budget to keep 4.5 firefighter positions. Is that, just so
I think the
so
fire
understand.
department is very.
I'm trying, I'm
I
using
think
that
the
as
fire-
an easy example,
Yeah, the
but.
fire department is it's pretty
That is a
clear.
department.
Right.
And I think that is pretty clear on exactly.
So you want to hear something like that from everyone, though. So if I don't get my ass,
But even the
whatever
fire
it is.
department is all of that. Again, going back to what I said about, I would love to see what they actually spent. What they're giving back this year, and seeing how much of the budget previously. Because I would love to know exactly where did they spend to that penny, their previous year's budget, and is that difference in what they're asking for? And I get it that we're doubling the fire department budget basically, or if not more because of the ambulance, but it's that I understand, but there's still other things in there, non-salary, that's in that budget. That can be variable. That could be extra services, other things that, again, do we as a town understand that if we don't have these, are we okay to live with them?
Okay. All right. I cut you off like 3 times.
I forget. No, I think the way you ended up is, it's hard to, So by the time we get to town meeting, and it's gone through and gotten, we are going to have actual departmental budgets, just like we always do. You know, what the town votes on is this department salaries expenses, this department salaries expenses, all the way down. So by the time we get there, at that point, we will know this is the department we took 50,000 out of because they asked 100. This is the department we took 5 of their 20. This is the department we couldn't touch. I mean, there's some we can't touch. What are you supposed to do with registrars? You can't touch
Right,
it. So
exactly.
there are certain, like, no touches, and those are the ones you see that don't have any blue there. It's like, gotta do it, no choice.
And we should be focusing on the ones
And
that.
then you'll have your specifics. For us to say it at this point, to say, oh, we just can't do it. We just can't do that to the departments that we just met with, who are already wondering, is it my job that's on the line? And to say, well, maybe it is your department. I mean, maybe one thing we could do is say, well, on the whole, you know, each 100,000 below a certain point means there's going to be, you know, that, not the first 100,000 isn't going to be layoffs, the second 100 isn't, maybe the third 100 is going to be like maybe 3 layoffs, but we're not going to say what departments are where. And then now you've got everyone worried, is it my department? So at some point, before we get into, that doesn't belong at the budget creation stage. That belongs at the stage where the select board and the finance committee say, here's the number, 1.2, 1.7, this is the number. Then we go back and say, these are the departments.
Okay,
This is the impact.
I understand.
Right, you also don't want to hear, like she was saying, you don't want to hear a story from the registrar's office if they don't need to tell a story.
No, I
They're
don't,
gonna get cut.
no,
Like,
no.
why do we want to do
And
that?
and those those untouchables, you know, we shouldn't even, you know,
Yeah,
we shouldn't even talk about that.
yeah.
My feeling is that if, let's say we go to a department and say, we're cutting, any department, there's mission critical services and benefits, and then there's things are prioritized, right? Some things are very important and other things are not important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that we're gonna go and look at the things that are not important first in terms of.
They're
you know,
not essentials.
Yeah, non-essential.
Moscow,
Great,
you know.
great
No.
word. Yeah,
I mean-
it's.
Must have, should have, could have, wish,
Right.
you know.
And just understanding that, okay.
It's gonna be Moscow. There's not gonna be any wish.
And I get it, in some places, you're gonna be like, no, there's no non-essential stuff. Everything is 100% essential, and I understand that.
So we're not even telling a department, let's say we cut 10,000 out of someone's department, we're not even telling them where to cut it from. We need to tell the department head, who best knows their own department, you need 10,000 out of your department, and they decide where it comes from. So it's going to be their story to say, well, I was able to do it without any layoffs. Another department said, you know, we're right down to it. We had to lose a part-time employee or something like that.
But remember, we already went through their expense lines with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
They're
So
all-
I'd be surprised if they could get that money anywhere besides
Layoffs.
People.
wages.
So it should be.
Peter?
Now, I know everybody has, you know, with the unions and your union negotiations and to helping the town avoiding any layoffs, would the town employees be willing to take a raise freeze for a year to help balance this? Is that something in consideration to avoiding other departments being laid off, fire department being laid off, to say, if we're a town, we're all working together, will all people take and I know you got your union agreements that you're all obligated to taking,
Yep.
would every town employee say, all right, is everybody willing to take a non-raise freeze of their 3% or whatever it all is that they're getting per year
Defer it.
to help to balance and help the town out?
It's happened several times. That's how we got in this problem.
And even
By
if
having
they
a,
were to-
by not having a freeze?
By going
Defer.
back,
Yeah.
going back.
Oh, so we're,
in the
so we're
5 to 10 years
compensating,
of-
so we're compensating of the.
That's why-
We fell that far behind.
We fell
Now
that far
we have
behind.
unions. That's before we had unions. Now we have them.
It's just
Yeah,
like the
we fell
water,
too far
the
behind.
water situation,
Right.
same thing.
And even if you did freeze it, you could freeze it for their entire contract. All you're doing is staving off the wall that you're gonna hit between now and when you unfreeze
Yeah.
it.
Now you've changed the value of that position. That person leaves, and the next person that comes in is gonna want market rate. It's one thing leads to another. We're trying to strike a balance that will grow reasonably each year. By holding it off, something's gonna spring out. We have not yet found, I don't know, might be an exception here or there, but I'm not aware of any position where someone who's been there for quite a while, a lot of experience, has left and not had to replace them at that same level or higher.
Why? I mean, if they don't have that much of experience and it's just a title or a piece of paper that
Because
you
the
have,
market-
it's
the
just the
market-
market rate of
It's
the
market.
hiring?
It's
The
the
market
market.
rate
Even though their
rises
value
around
is
us.
not as much, they still have to hire them for that amount of money for
Which
what they're
tells
worth.
you that your longtime employees with the experience are basically
Being derated, not that
doing
their
it
value.
for
A discount,
a
Right.
discount.
Tom Brady.
Yeah, you have
And-
equity in that.
And these are people you don't want to lose.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't.
understand that.
There's so much, right from planning this 26 budget in the first place, it's been very important, even knowing that things were coming up, that we don't want to lose employees that we have. We never win on that one.
Right.
We,
Even
We
at
can
how
freeze.
small of a town we really are, I mean, when it comes to these salaries, are these Western Mass salaries that Boston's actually, setting these numbers?
That study
Are
was
they-
supposed to accommodate.
That,
Yeah,
that should have been
was,
accommodated
yes.
for Western Mass,
Yes.
not Berkshire salaries,
And-
whereas
yeah.
more, but Western Mass salaries.
Some of the
Yeah.
intangibles, I don't know what it could encompass would be things like just the quality of working in Hadley.
Right.
Versus the quality of working in Plainville or something
Right,
like that.
right, I got you.
yeah.
And
And
the
I
other
think,
thing
they
by
didn't go for the top of
increasing-
the range, I'm sorry, but the
Yeah.
union, they had the range of comparables and they went smack at them,
Oh, yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
They were
Yeah,
not
they
at the
set
top.
they set that market rate, so to speak,
Yeah.
was
It was pretty
average.
reasonable.
It was very reasonable. I think
Yeah.
it was halfway, 5 or 6,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, in like a 10-step scale. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you're gonna find that if staff was set at the market rate, that market rate that they set was technically 75% of what other communities in our bracket, so to speak, were paying. And so it's even less. And the other thing is that, with increased wages and increased benefits and things like that, the town as a whole becomes obviously more appealing to people applying for jobs that are more qualified, more highly trained, and it does increase retention, as Linda mentioned, and we can keep people for longer. And it's less of a struggle to have to go out and find new folks to backfill these positions.
And even after you hire them, we're seeing that, you're gonna spend a ton of money on other things like training and seminars and all this stuff for them to catch up.
Yeah, and we don't have the luxury anymore of having overlap training.
No.
I mean, didn't you mention the other day that if you lose somebody, you hire somebody new at 20% higher?
Yeah, meaning in the
20%
professional
is the
world.
average?
Yeah, certain positions are less, but on average in the professional world, 20% is pretty much the norm. I mean, for most professionals, if you go and leave a job, you're probably going to a job that you're probably gonna make 20% more than you probably
Right.
made where you are.
So, as we see in the municipal world, it's just like, they just change seats.
Yeah, musical
Sorry.
chairs.
Who's gonna be the one that's gonna decide of how much money needs to be for these 3 buildings when it comes to the capital and the maintenance? Is there somebody, like you said, painting or, lights or
Had painter in the office today.
is it kind of one of those things is there a base number that say, okay, we'd like to have this much money in a kitty for maintenance for 1 year for
Those
this
are-
building, this.
Those are up for discussion. and we
Yeah,
can-
one thing I have come across in the past is that there are formulary that cities and towns use based on, and you may have
Cost of
heard me
the
say this
building.
before,
Yep.
based on the age of the building, the type of the construction, its use, occupancy. you know, you can get right down to the nuts and bolts. Is it hardwood floors, is it tile floors, is it carpet? You know, all those things you can plug into these calculators, and based on the age and all that, should give you estimated costs, average estimated costs you can expect annualized for the life of the building. So you can plot this thing out 50 years.
And we should be building buildings, when we build a building, we should be building in a percentage of maintenance costs every time we build a building, so that we never have to worry about it again, but we don't do that.
Were you watching old building committee
I was
meetings?
watching
Because
you, yeah, you that. I'm almost positive.
I'm gonna put my hand in the boiling water right now, because I like doing that. If everybody's been asking for money for maintenance, that the town doesn't have any money, then where do we get the money to put solar onto this building?
It was already in the budget.
It's
When they
capital.
passed, it was part of the capital for this
It
building.
was a
They've been holding-
capital budget,
They just
so-
didn't spend it at the beginning, they were holding off.
Was that?
It-
But
It was in the-
that's where
it was in
I'm
the
seeing
original
of
plan.
priorities as to saving $200 a month on your electric bill or doing maintenance on a building that hasn't been done in 3 years.
But was that through the debt? Was that borrowed?
I
Yes.
believe,
Yeah.
Or was that
Well,
free
then I
cash,
would-
like in a
No,
way?
no, 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 it was free cash, when we borrowed for the entire building, it's part of, it's in that fund.
In that fund, okay.
Yeah.
So it was in
that
that
was already
fund.
allocated.
Right.
And that, when we've been holding that last, I don't know, 100,000 or so for a few years now.
That, to me, is, a solar is a want where you need maintenance. That's where I'm saying that money should have been spent, whether asking for $50,000 in the future because we want it for solar, we've got so much money that we've set aside, that we're spending money on saving a little bit for an electric bill where you need maintenance on your building now.
I'm
I
not
think
sure
that-
It's a little, I think it's a good savings,
Yeah, especially if it's all electric.
yeah.
But this building is not all electric, it's got gas.
Does it have gas in it? I thought it was all electric.
This has got gas, the libraries only has
Oh, maybe the libraries.
electric.
Libraries,
sorry.
electric,
Big
that's.
So
true.
that to me is the way how you're thinking is, you know, we have money, we're gonna hold out for it, but we need capital on maintenance, but we're gonna hold this money out for solar, that's gonna save us so much money on our electric bill, but we're gonna let the ceiling tiles go, the paint go, and everything else. I'm just saying the money that's being saved is not being based on a priority as a need, but as a want, because I want the solar, instead of needing maintenance for the building.
But you know what? Town does get to vote on what they want.
And I think.
I mean, that's basic, that's what our system is.
But I bet if you
They
put that to a
voted-
vote and said, okay, we want to raise your taxes to put it for a general budget and capital for maintenance, but we already have $100,000 on the side, if they knew that, I bet you they wouldn't go for it. They'd want to put the money towards the general maintenance, not to buying solar. That to me, I'm just saying, however it was voted, I mean, we voted for $2 million to doing the boys and girls locker rooms, and they're only doing the girls. Should have that gone up for a second vote for it only being the girls locker room? So that to me, I look at this, we're asking for money for capital for maintenance, but we're putting on solar. The priorities are
I
not
understand
being
what you're
met.
saying. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and the concept, I think, is the same, right? When they designed this building, whoever designed the building, or whatever the group was that designed the building, I understand what your argument is that they looked at solar the same way that we would want to look at a maintenance account, right? They built in a certain amount to put solar on as opposed to building in a certain amount for a maintenance account. I think that's more of an operational discussion as far as, you know, how we plan buildings when we build them, and I completely understand what you're saying. And you very well may be right. Maybe the town, if that was put in front of them as part of a borrowing plan, they would have said, you know, I don't think it's worth it to put that amount of money aside for this savings as opposed to how much we're gonna need to paint the walls and fix this and fix the.
Because now we got to raise taxes for money that we've already had.
It's certainly an interesting question, which is, how many of these kind of holdouts? Because I
The
honestly.
library's they're
Yeah,
holding
I mean,
out some for their
I mean,
roof,
how many of these holdouts are hanging out?
for them to be solar.
Well, the other thing was, I mean, you can look at the North Hadley Fire Station, they had extra, they used money for the fiber that went all the
I was
way
just
down.
thinking, and we were still holding
Yeah.
on to fiber optics.
Yeah, so we did fiber, I mean, which was great that we have fiber, but that, I didn't even realize, when we vote for these buildings, these other things that were added in.
Right.
Which
Included.
were included
Okay.
in the building costs. And we had that, which we didn't realize.
Yeah.
I mean,
so,
it's,
so I guess but to Peter's point here, which is, you know, how many of these things are still hanging out there? I mean, do they represent opportunities where we could lessen the blow a little bit?
is there balances in the building accounts? I don't think there's
wanna
big
ask
balances.
Sure.
He put his hand in the
I will.
boiling water.
I
He'll
will.
ask him. He'll ask
I
him.
will.
I'm not asking.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah.
It's a valid
question.
it's
It is
valid
it is a valid question, and I think, I know that there are, I do know that the library has 80 or so thousand left in their account. The only reason I know that is because we're dealing with the roof situation, not the solar, but the repair of the roof, the actual
Yes.
roof. And so I do know a little bit about that. I did not know that there was money set aside still, or the amount for this building.
Yeah, I thought they spent that.
You know, it's just, it's one of those situations where, and I don't know if there's any money left in North Hadley Fire Station as well. I don't know if Mike utilize the rest of it
Yeah,
for the fiber.
optics, yeah.
But it is a valid question, and it is one of those places that if we needed to claw back to reduce the blow, we would have to meet with all of those folks the same way that we meet with department heads.
Because that was a want. A
This
need
isn't-
is maintenance,
And we'd
not
probably
a
have to
want.
reallocate it as well, because they were
No.
all they were all borrowed, correct?
They were borrowed 5 years ago.
So that money
Right,
is
so I mean,
sitting
we
in
would
the
have to,
account.
Yeah.
town meeting would have
This
to
is-
vote to reallocate.
Correct, it can be redirected, and it comes up twice a year with these, I contact each one of, because I keep a capital spreadsheet, we have to, let's say someone's, we vote $100,000 for a truck and it costs 92. It would sit there forever. If we didn't have some kind of a record and we had the capital, we compare them and I keep a spreadsheet and it goes like, are you done? Can we get this $8,000 back? Now, whoever's buying it doesn't really care what they want, that's not their job, they're like, I bought my truck, I'm all set. So it has to be something that we are working on all the time. And one of them that's purported, that's in there are the buildings. And so there were, each time we checked, the library had a call for it, and this was planned for the senior center, and you guys have one, or the public safety for the fiber optics. And then they will, when they're done with that, they get redirected into something else, if there's any money left over. So, this is one of, I think it was you I was talking with, or it was you or Jennifer today, was talking about getting that out and looking at it in a different way, and seeing what balances we have in.
That wouldn't affect the operational override. It would affect whether we needed more money for one-time maintenance. It would be a nice way to draw money out for maintenance right
Right.
now, and I agree with that, if we can do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think the
That's-
priorities aren't being met to what we really need as to what we want, which I've
Well,
always
CPA
said.
did do something similar, where they sat and looked
Yeah.
at all the old projects and where we're,
Oh,
you know.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong,
she does,
Linda
they
does
do that all the time.
She does
Yeah.
that, she does it annually. Every single year, we see that she sends the capital duties list, jobs list, whatever it is, all of the projects that have been started, all of the things that have been, borrowed for. You got 65 cents left in your cruiser account from 3 years ago. You're done, I assume, right? Those kinds of things. And so she does do that, and we do roll that back. But we're talking slightly
Right.
different ballgame here when we're talking about buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
But we certainly have those numbers, and it's on the list.
But I don't know enough about solar as to whether it's worth it or not. A lot of people are doing it, and they're everywhere. That's your
Yeah.
opinion.
Oh, I know it's
So I
not.
just
Oh,
want
I
to
know
make
it's
sure
not.
it doesn't go.
All right.
no.
I have solar, I
So-
know it's
This
not.
is an opinion.
I want to go back and we are going to do the special town meeting on the 9th, and that's to know if this is going to go forward. If it says yes and we put it to a ballot, we have to wait 45 days, correct?
We don't have to wait 45 days. We have to do the ballot within 45 days.
Oh,
So
within 45
Yes,
days.
Is
So
there a
my-
minimum waiting time?
There's no minimum. It's got to be
So we can do it
within
2 weeks.
45 days. So
Do it
I'm
2 hours.
thinking
Yeah, we
2
can do it the
weeks or
next day.
something along those
In
lines.
45 days.
What
Oh.
is the target then? Are you thinking 2 weeks? It
I'm
could be-
hoping something like that.
That's what we
it.
talked about.
Haven't selected a date for that yet.
Okay.
I gotta work with Jessica and exactly how that's gonna work, because again, we're slapping another town meeting on her department, which she is not budgeted for, so we gotta work with her on how to make that work as easy as possible.
So do you know when we usually have the regular fall town meeting?
It's usually at the end of October.
End of October.
Usually
It's a
the
Thursday,
third
so,
Thursday. We
Okay.
pushed it last year. We pushed it into November last year. but
Yeah.
That was only because we were struggling getting free cash numbers. We have Lori back. Linda and Lori work super efficiently together, so my guess is that certainly wouldn't be a reason to push it back into November. But we just have to be careful about how far. Jessica has certain dates that she has to work with in November as well, so. My hope would be that we could leave everything as it is, put this meeting on the 9th, possibly
9th.
2 weeks after that, aim for a
The 9th.
ballot.
So that's the
And then
special,
still
special.
have
Yep.
the
The 9th.
fall town meeting where it is,
I wrote
because
down-
in
It's the
the
7th,
event that it fails at ballot vote, Linda and I need a couple of weeks to
Okay.
prepare
Right.
what the
Special,
budget looks
special
like
town
for the
meeting.
regular.
regular town.
And we need time to post and have finance
Special,
meetings and
well,
everything
No,
else.
I mean, if it's 2 weeks
So,
after the
I mean,
ninth,
that's, yeah,
23rd of.
My
That's-
original thought was that we would try to push it into November again.
Special,
Yeah.
special town meeting.
I would think
We
so.
would have to work with Jessica and
Special town
Linda, you
meeting.
mentioned.
She doesn't want it too far.
Special
in.
town
Right,
meeting.
there's something in November that you were, there was a deadline that you
Special-
had to
special
meet.
override.
No, it's the
Is
tax
the
rate
one-
setting.
Tax, that's
That's
right,
out
tax
of the
rate.
assessor's office, and that's.
So we have to have,
That's what we bumped right up against last year.
exactly, and we
That
did
was-
it the second week in
that was the
November,
end,
so we
yep.
could probably get away with doing that again.
maybe on the 6th or
Yeah,
something.
So that would
Okay.
give us almost a month.
We would get the October to plan.
Yep.
If we could make a decision in September,
Yep.
which way we're going, we would have all of October.
And we wouldn't have to worry about it at all.
Or
If it
until the
fails at
last
the
week.
actual town meeting vote, you don't have to go to a ballot at all, then you got plenty of time to work into the next town meeting. If it
Right.
passes at town meeting,
Yeah.
then we do the ballot, and if it passes there, we're okay.
Okay.
We've already prepped that. If it fails, then we need the time to have meetings and, again, we're gonna have to
Make
bring in human
adjustments.
resources and figure out where,
Yep.
where the cuts, can the select board and the finance committee simply say, last in, first out? Is it essential versus non-essential? All of those decisions have to be made.
How much can be done by attrition, which is what we're always hoping.
Okay.
That there'll be some natural.
When it comes to the dates of, say if it's gonna be September 9th, when it comes to posting it, how are we posting it to the taxpayers in town? Is it Hadley Media? Is it Facebook? I know that there's the red signs that say vote today or town meeting today. Is it just that one day that the sign is out? Because I've talked to people and go, I didn't even know that there was a town meeting that they wouldn't have went to voted. That I don't think the public is being known in enough of time to know when the meeting
There's
is.
regulations on newspaper publishing.
With 5 public hearings on this one meeting, we'll make sure that we announce it at every single one of them. We will utilize Hadley Media, we will utilize
Alex will help us out.
everything. Jennifer has gotten our town Facebook page up and running again. We have the PD Facebook page, we have the fire department Facebook page. We're gonna advertise the heck out of
They
it.
there's-
they
'cause there's
actually
people
send it
that-
on your text now.
Because people
on
go
your
up to
phone.
Hockenham, they don't go in the center of town, they go to South Hadley up to Hockenham,
Yep.
and then after it's like, okay, they're going to North Hadley, they're not going to the center of
We'll
town,
make sure
they're
that
going to
those little,
Sunderland.
we'll make sure those little yard signs are not necessary. We'll advertise it in every other way possible. They'll be out there still, but we'll make sure that that's not how people find out about it.
I wonder if we might want to, at select board meetings or even now, reminding people, you said they sent it out on the alerts.
Yeah.
But they have to sign up for those alerts.
Oh, so,
Can we,
so
you
they're
mix
not
it
automatic.
Don't you have
yeah.
in August, you're sending out water bills, right?
I think she's sending something out. in
Yeah,
August,
so how about just putting something in the,
don't know.
are we allowed to put something in the water
Well,
bill?
I have to
Or
find
how
out.
about on the
I don't-
envelope?
I don't
There's a
know
cost
for sure.
The
associated with
cost,
that.
yeah, there's,
Why?
Another piece of paper that just says town meeting with a stamp.
It's been done, and
Yeah,
so that's
photocopy.
certainly
Yeah.
possible. but-
Yeah, or you could just print whatever you need number of envelopes, have the new envelopes printed that say.
1.9,
And they have the notice on it,
$50.
right across the bottom, reminder.
How to get a stamp?
You can get a stamp, but that's
If it's
personnel.
allowed, so.
You have to use the envelopes eventually anyway, so just print some extras with
Yeah.
an imprint already on them. And actually, there's some printers, you can take your existing box of envelopes, if you need 500, 1,000, and they can just run them back through an envelope press and stamp them. I grew up in printing.
All right, the next thing it's also on the agenda is, I put on there, is the DPW. We talked about that building, and that was at the end of the town meeting this past town meeting. What's the thoughts? What's the plan? Do we have anybody talked about when that will be presented again? We talked about it being presented at the special town meeting, but I'm guessing that's
Not to
may
be-
not
Not to be
happen.
flippant about the whole thing, but I guess the way that I see it is, you know, why build a $20 million building if you don't have the staff to work in it?
Right.
Yeah.
Let's
Or the
sell- let's save
1.9
the
to balance our
staff.
town.
Let's save the staff, let's save the staff
I would
first.
defend it by saying
Yeah.
that, first of all, that's pretty much the existing program. There wasn't a lot of additions to that. But the reality is that, you know, this is all new information, dates, times. It was kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for the SSTM to come together. There was money set aside with the consultant to present. And so there's going to have to be discussions with the chair, probably a meeting with the DPW committee to see, based on all of this stuff that's rolling right now, which wasn't the case the last time the group got together, you know, for a disposition.
Well, I think that was a big deal, that we had hired someone, and he's willing, that company is willing to do a presentation at our town meeting.
Yep.
How far off we can put that where he will still come, you know, even if
That was determined.
he said he would come to another one.
Yeah,
Jim
it
Jim
was-
said that he said he would come
He'd
to
come-
another meeting.
But-
And
One
he
more
said
meeting.
one more, but
That's
it
it.
doesn't really
So,
matter
maybe next
when.
spring.
So
I
it
think
can be
we-
a year from now.
I mean, I was thinking, that's what I was thinking, is that maybe it happens at, maybe we bring them back at the one where we're talking about the capital stabilization, and then when we build the DPW building, we build in the maintenance costs to build the building and have that whole discussion.
It's not in there, but you know, so yeah, he's good for one more presentation. Obviously, the stuff, the numbers that they're using have a shelf life, you know.
Right.
Right.
It's 2%, 1.8. At one point, it was 1.8 per month. I don't know if we've obviously backed off on that, but that was what we were looking at, you know,
Well, it
2 years
depends on
ago.
the tariff rate
Yeah.
of the day.
Of the
week.
steel.
Of the week.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, you don't want to let it sit too long. Personally, as a member of the committee, I felt that we had owed it to the town to come back with the numbers. We've spent the money on the consultant. They did more than their share of the work.
Yeah.
And we have what we felt was the most reasonable plan that we could get for the money that was available. So it still needs to be presented. Obviously, I'm not tone deaf here, seeing everything that's going on, you know, where it's going to be, but.
I don't want to forget about it, and I know we've talked about it, and I want to,
Do we know?
I don't foresee it going through or anything, but we don't want to forget about it.
Right.
Do we know what the-
We don't
what
want
the
to be
cap-
another set of plans on a shelf that we
Right.
paid for that we didn't do anything with.
Do
Right.
we know what the
To join all the
debt,
others.
Yeah.
the annual debt cost of that is?
Jim had gotten that together from his presentation in there, I don't recall what
Yeah,
it
it was
is.
19.7 million, and then I think, yeah, like I said, you were kind enough to provide what that meant, and I don't recall the impact of that. No, I'm not even gonna guess.
Yeah, that's what those printout sheets were done for. Those are really for them too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think it was,
Using the,
if it was
calculator.
20 years, it was so much, and if
Yeah,
it was
there
30
was a-
years, it was like $900, and then it was
Right.
like $1,100.
Yeah.
That's what the projections were, I think.
Per household?
Yeah.
Oh,
Additional, yes.
Annual.
annual.
Okay, so, also with the DPW, Andy, has been working or talking with Scott quite a bit on the generator, the backup generator, and maybe you want to let everybody else know where the backup generator for the water is and what's been happening with
Well, we
that.
also happen to have somebody who's been central to the process sitting 2 seats away from me, but.
I don't know if I'd say central to the process. But I can tell you what I've learned from both Scott and Mike. There's an inherent disagreement on direction between Scott and Mike. So we had been in a kind of a holding pattern for quite a while. We had an individual who was going to rebuild the engine for us. they discovered that one of the pistons in the engine is damaged, the piston in the sleeve. And they basically searched the continental United States to find another engine of this nature to replace that piston. They were unable to locate anything anywhere. At some point in the middle of that process, Scott came to me and said, listen, I'm not sure that the guy we have doing this right now is working out, so I'd like to have this other company take a look. So I gave him permission to have the other company take a look. They searched the entire continental United States and came up empty as well. So there is no piston to rebuild this engine to get the generator up and running again. That leaves us, and everyone is in agreement on this, there are only two other options for us. One of them is a complete purchase of a new piece of equipment, which runs anywhere from $450,000 to $550,000-ish to replace the entire situation.
I had heard 363, but based on the quote.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Or have a piston and a sleeve remade by a expert machinist who I believe happens to live in Hadley, who used to do this for a living and for the
Stevie?
Navy. Yep.
Stevie?
And buy a few more years out of this. They don't think that fix is going to be something that's going to make this thing last another 50 years. However, the kid who I brought Randy and David Phil kind of into this, and I had both Mike and Scott talk to both of them, and Randy actually met with the guy who is currently going to rebuild this engine. And we're now in agreement that this is the best direction to go, to have Steve remill a new piston, a new sleeve. The gentleman who is currently working with us will do a full rip down rebuild of the engine, which is what the company that Scott had looked into said that they would do. And these are the kinds of engines that he works on, and he says that he will be able to rebuild this engine and give us more than just a few years buying. Until that happens, until we get this piston and the sleeve remade, we're stuck with where we're at with renting a generator, because it's the life, that water station is the lifeblood essentially of Hadley. And so that's happening now. The piston is with him. They're doing their laser measurements on it, and he is going to remake it, and they're going to break the whole thing down, rebuild it, and put the new piston in.
How much have we spent?
Don't know.
Yeah, that's the interesting question, which is, we had obviously, this, and to be clear, this is the backup generator for the water plant at the Callahan Wells. So if something fails, this thing kicks in and automatically and maintains water for the town. But, obviously there was an emergency repair when it failed, because I think it failed on the weekend. There's been rental, and we're.
I've seen one invoice so far, and I don't know if another one has come, but it is all charges included, and it was around 20,000 or something like that. That was for the emergency hookup, all of the parts and pieces. It included all of the hourly labor that has happened up to this point, and it included the engine rebuild kit that is going to be used to break down and rebuild the engine, as well as the rental, I think, for, was it 2 months or something?
Yeah, to be clear.
How old is
this-
this generator?
This started in,
If the parts aren't even available,
So-
how old is this thing? Where is this thing?
And
It's-
it's already been rebuilt once as well.
it's a Cummins propane fueled generator. And there are two options near in an aquifer and so close to the fort are propane or natural gas. And since there's no
You can't use.
natural gas down there,
Nope.
it comes to propane. So that's the kind you got. They bought a Cummins, and apparently this is like other things, this is kind of was a short shelf life run, and and it's an elliptical shaped piston, and I don't get too far into the details here, but what does concern me about some of the costs, obviously, is my understanding, there won't be a warranty on the repair. But, you know, when we're all looking at a replacement of 363,000, it's kind of like, well, given everything else that we're going through here, where are we gonna come up with that money? Because that's the cleanest way to do it, would be, you know, this thing's been worked on before. It had something failed that caused coolant to get into that cylinder and blow the piston, and you blow that, of course, they've gotta do the sleeve. And this happened in February, so that's part of the reason why the bill, it didn't happen last weekend when we're looking at a $20,000 bill. It happened
Right.
in February, so we're getting on there. We've had a few months of rental, and that rental rate is.
It's insane. It's like renting a crane. I mean, it's just, it's stupid money. It's one of those. The only positive part is that, you know, with all of the kind of finagling that we've been doing, we have been getting that we've gotten a couple of deep discounts in what we've been renting it for, as well as the fact that the fire chief did declare a state of emergency within, you know, however he does that within his realm. And it did open up certain pockets of money that he can utilize to be able to pay for things like that. But yeah, it's getting on to be a long time. Randy did, again, talked with, the guy's name is Nate, who is gonna do the rebuild, and after speaking with him, Randy told me that he has full confidence in what the kid told him, that he'll be able to do everything that he said he can do, without a guarantee. You know, not gonna be a guarantee on a piece of paper, but he's one of those guys that, regardless of the guarantee, is guaranteeing it. You know, I don't rebuild engines so that they break in a couple of years. I'm gonna make sure that this thing lasts you as long as I can keep it alive.
Well, and he also works in other parts of the town at this time, right? He works at the
He does.
public safety complex.
He does.
So, I mean, there's
He's
an
the
ongoing
generator guy.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah,
he must
that's his
maintain.
job, so.
So, and I believe the chairman of the select board has made he's made the decision to go ahead and pursue with the manufacturer,
Yes.
the custom manufacturer of the piston.
Yeah, because we were gonna go in a different direction until we set up a meeting and had him talk to this guy. I was pulling the trigger, basically saying we're going in a different direction. And then they had the conversations and, you know, kind of changed his mind and said, we're already this deep into this, go ahead and do it. Part of the question was whether or not they could do a full tear down in place. One of the things that Scott was telling me is that the other company looked at it and said, we can't do it there. We have to crane it out, take it back to our shop, rip it apart, put it all back together, and then you gotta crane it back in and all that. With all that added cost of the crane and everything else, this other guy says, no, I'm gonna do the exact same thing that they're gonna do, but I'm gonna do it right there. So,
How's he gonna keep the elements out?
Well, it's been since February. So,
But it's been opened up since.
well,
February?
I'm sure I don't know the condition of the parts. I mean, you know, what's been
I don't know enough about it. All I
So-
know is he
I
says
mean,
he
I
can
know,
do it.
open engine in the elements is
Not
not a
good,
good
right?
thing.
So my question is, you talked about maybe you got a $20,000 bill. Where are we getting the money from?
100%.
Where are we pulling that from?
DPW has money with it in
Within
his
its
water.
bu-
His
He has
water.
some?
This is water.
This is water. This is.
Okay, so they're pulling it out of
That's money to do
that.
that. That's
So-
literally
so-
the only account we have that
so
actually
things like
has,
this-
has a good
Okay.
amount of money in it.
And because it's part of the emergency services, there's emergency services coordinator.
I
has-
think Mike actually has monies that he can access when he declares an emergency from his being the EMD.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's utilized any of it yet, or if we're gonna go through water, and if and when we get to a point where we wanna stop using that. I don't know how they've decided those things, but again, there is money in the water enterprise.
Meaning
Yep.
something as critical as this, we should have like an operating procedure on next time this happens, what we're gonna do.
Well, Scott mentioned to me that they rebuilt the engine once, and I asked him what they did the last time. How did we end up in the same mess that we ended up last time? And unfortunately, when it blew the last time and they rebuilt it, that was before his time, so he didn't know the answers to those questions.
But to
Meaning-
Shardul's point, it would be good to
Yeah.
Yeah.
establish a procedure. I mean, this is kind of, Scott's in there because, you know, DPW, and you got Mike in there because it's emergency services, so.
The point is that we're probably on borrowed time at this point.
We are.
With this engine. So in the next 5 years, we should probably look to replacing it.
Mhm.
I guess that's, you know, that would be probably the prudent thing to do. If it
These
even
are one of
la-
those-
if it even lasts that
These are
long.
one of those items that we could get into a capital line, and if we have a capital account, we might be able to buy at least a portion of it with cash and not have to borrow $367,000.
Well, the second thing is that, you know, we do have the money. It's not like, you know, if we had to come up with $400,000 to replace it tomorrow, it's not like we don't, between stabilization and our
That's true.
borrowing,
And
our free
borrowing,
cash
and
you know,
water.
having it go to this point, 5 months.
Yeah.
While we're kind of, everybody's hemming and hawing on what to do.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
I may not have explained it the best. I apologize if it sounded like hemming and hawing. It was a disagreement on how to approach it. And you're right, we do have the money to, if we wanted to buy a new one. I think just judging by the way that we generally operate, this was the last ditch effort to repair it without having to go down that road. So it just, everybody kind of felt like, let's give this a go. And again, we're being promised by professionals who make these parts for a living and have for decades that we can do this. We can absolutely make this happen. and
Well, we're
repair it.
probably gonna be spending a third of the cost of a new one to get to that point. Right?
Possibly.
Right?
Well, depending on how long of the rental for the generator and to
Meaning
repair
5
it.
months, 20,000, let's just say it's 10, 20,000 a month.
Yeah.
You know, you're, by the time this thing is said and done, because it's probably gonna take, what, at least a month or two to get all the parts fabricated, rebuilt, everything else, you're gonna be going into probably 8 to 9 months.
I hope not.
By the time you're all said and done, and you're probably close to a third, close to a quarter or a third of the cost of a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, we need to be better minded when we're doing stuff, especially with something that's old. I can
I'm
understand if
happy
it's
to
5
change-
years old.
I'm happy to change my perspective in that when something breaks, we buy a new one. If you want
Well,
that, I'm all
The
over.
thing is that if it's a,
See, Amy,
I usually go half. I usually go if it's more than half the value of it, then. If it's a
Can we
third,
park it
then
at
no,
your
you do
place?
the repair. If it's up to half of
Park
it,
whatever you want over
then you
there.
buy new.
Let-
Not a third.
let's just
right.
make it clear.
I completely understand
This
the
is
concept.
this is the water for the town.
Absolutely.
This isn't like, you know, a wheel bearing for a cruiser.
Right. I know, I completely understand the concept. I think that's one of those operational things that we would need to discuss with finance and everyone else to get a determination, like Peter was just saying. At what rate, at what percentage do we decide that this is too much to spend?
Well,
before
especially
we
at the
purchase?
life, you look at the life of the piece of equipment. If it's something that you've established that you're having trouble sourcing the parts, and it's already antiquated in that sense,
Mhm.
and there's only like 3 people that can fit, you know, we're doing this custom thing, you know, we should have a little bit of
A lot of that has been brought up already. Certainly, if
Yeah.
you've got an oddball and we're trying to fix it again, why are we dealing with it again, you know?
It has other parts too, right? They're okay?
All right, so we just want to put that out in the open, because we know that's happening and that's costing some money, so I wanted to talk
Okay.
about that. Next, I wanted just to, I know there was some questions and we want to, Scott's not here, he has a day off, but we can write down any questions, but I put it on the agenda, the excavator / mower, because we had talked about that at a previous town meeting, and it was voted in, and there was a little bit of questions afterwards, but I put it on the agenda so we can ask the questions, and then, yes, Scott's not here, but he can get back to us, so.
I just wanted, everybody knows what my thought was with this excavator, that I knew it was a piece of equipment that we didn't need, it weighed too much, it cost too much. We have this, which was presented to the town, that this New Holland tractor was too old, you can't get parts for it. Well, this tractor has now been repaired and we're still using it. And what I had stated was that this machine that weighs 13 tons, it's gonna get buried. Well, from what I was told in the springtime, behind the high school, it had to be pulled out. By, I don't know if it was a loader or a backhoe, and the things that I had mentioned, it happened. So it had gotten stuck doing the ditches. So, and we're still have, which if we were gonna be doing the repairs on this New Holland, we're still keeping this piece of equipment. So not only do we have a $330,000 excavator that got stuck, which I had mentioned in our town meeting, we're now keeping the same piece of equipment that we said was too old and you can't get parts for. So once again, I'm thinking about the money that's being spent, where's it going, the responsibility, the obligations as to, to the town, $300,000, that's a generator. You think about things like that as to, we were talking about the town's in trouble now financially. And we were talking about, well, if there is going to be an override or a tax increase, and in our meeting, I said, well, who's going to, I don't want to say the word police, or oversee these departments of what they want to buy, and are they spending too much? Is it a want and not a need? And nothing was really brought up as to who was going to watch over them as to if they're spending too much. And I still believe that this is one of those things. It was a want to have. It sounded great. Other towns that I was told that they have this machine, town of Williamsburg, but all you have is mountains. There's no ditches there to mow, and all you're just doing is mowing alongside. So that just really bothered me, that the stuff that I had presented to the town, and I know that was a town vote, of a machine that I knew was going to get stuck, and it did, and we're still keeping the machine on the representation that I thought that if we were going to be getting this excavator and fixing this New Holland, we were going to be putting it on surplus. That's what I thought was going to be happening, and from what I've been told, we're keeping it. So that was my only thing that I have to say.
So you want me to ask Scott if that's accurate as far as the New Holland goes?
Yeah, what's going on with that? And
I did actually inquire about this after I saw the agenda.
Okay.
And so I can tell you that the New Holland, right now has been, like the generator, was given a second life directly from the select board chair. And where we're at with the New Holland is that it is operational. Similar to the generator, it was a 2-year manufacture cycle, and parts are very difficult to get for it, which is why we were looking at buying the new one. It was an early model of an articulating mower, which is very heavy. Therefore, the counterweights are extremely heavy. So the main point of failure here has been part of the articulation as well as the rims. The rims
Are taking the blunt of all the weight.
are
Understand.
taking them. So
Understand.
they've failed a few times. They've had to change tire strategies to make sure that this thing doesn't get stiffer wall tires to be able to accommodate all that extra weight. So that was it. That was part of the reasons why they were looking to get rid of it. However, in the meantime, they have been able to fix part of it. It does serve as a snowplow and a loader. They still have those parts which originally came for it. This thing, which was bought over 20 years ago, this New Holland, it's been around for a while. It's not like we bought it 5 years ago and we're going, oh, gee, that was a mistake. No, it's been around back into a couple of DPW superintendents ago, several.
It's like, yeah, more than 2.
So I look at it as like, okay, what's the value of this on the used market as it is operational? I hear maybe $15,000. What is it for parts? Well, there's not a lot of them around. It would, if something broke, if the wheel broke, what would it sell for? I'm hearing maybe $12,000. Even if it was zero, quite frankly, from a piece of DPW equipment, perspective, if we're able to use it as still working as a mower, if it's still available to plow snow, still as a salt loader, still one of those things that can back up other pieces of equipment. It's not really costing us a lot of money to maintain. We've already done that. If another wheel breaks, you betcha it's going on the block. And that's what I've been told. But it's working now. Since we bought the Volvo, it has not failed. The Volvo being the excavator, which, by the way, was used this past weekend to dig an emergency trench for Chili's, which allowed them to continue to operate and was put into use. In fact, I asked about the excavator, which is also a mower. It does have the articulating mower. They're getting that part worked out because they only got it in April. They've used it for a couple of water main breaks in the past 10 days. I think it was maybe even the past week. It's been out several times every week since they bought it and doing digging and the like. The only way to really, if with the back of Hopkins when it was under construction, you ever walk back out there, I mean, anything that wasn't tracked would get stuck in there regardless. As far as clearing ditches, you don't go out clearing ditches in April. You clear ditches in October, September when it's nice and dry. That's when you use that to go ahead and work on culverts. So the fact that it was out there in April when they first got it, they lesson learned.
Yeah.
Don't take it out in the mud. Don't take even some of the loaders would get stuck out there. Kubota might get stuck out there. I've been on a 4-wheel drive tractor get stuck in the mud. It's very possible in the wrong time of year. So anyway, I think where we're at now is they're going to run that New Holland until something major fails, and then they'll part with it. Again, that's the DPW director acting on instruction from the chairman of the select board. So as far as the Volvo is concerned, we're a few months in, and it was not a cheap piece of equipment, but what is? You got to spend $100,000 to get a pickup truck these days.
Exactly.
So anyway,
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
the
Well, I
reaction
asked-
I've had.
Can I make the recommendation that they don't use that thing, that it's only used for mowing? Because if you look at the fleet that we have for snow plowing, you see all these newer trucks that are within 3 to 4 years old, that we shouldn't be having that New Holland or the backhoe that we have plowing snow. That tractor should only be used for just doing the mowing of the ditches. If we're gonna try to keep this thing as long as it's gonna be, it shouldn't be hauling salt, it shouldn't be doing anything else, but just mowing with the fleet that we have of all doing our snow.
So you would prefer not to use it?
Have it be, the whole reason why we got the loader was for it to be
Preserve.
mowing lawns. Preserving it as long as you can, just keeping it from mowing the lawns. Everybody likes to have another piece of equipment to add, 500 square feet to this $18 million garage,
Well, I
to
think,
put it inside for cover.
I think that when you're looking at, I don't think the New Holland was actually included in that program.
Oh.
But,
It's going outside.
Thanks.
throw a tarp over it like,
Right.
other stuff. But,
But stuff like that, if we're trying to preserve something like the generator, okay, have it being say, Scott, it's only gonna be used for mowing. We spent the money on this thing, whatever it cost. We have all the equipment, we've got the loaders, we've got an excavator for loading up these dump trucks with salt. Have that thing be dedicated just for mowing. Maybe it can last another few more years. But at least doing something like that, not using it for multi-purposes, for the main reason for having it was for mowing lawns, not to be doing all the other things for snow plowing and loading salt. We have all the equipment to be doing those two other
I
things.
think they were using it as primary reason that I remember was to cut brush along the side of either culverts or the side of the road.
That I understand.
And the Volvo has the attachments to cut down the side of the road, which they've been using it to, I asked them about what was going on down in Hockenham, and because they did that whole section there, and they used the Volvo to cut the trees, and they used the Kubota to cut the flat areas, and that's pretty much the way they've been divvying up the work. I think the preference would be not to use the New Holland to do that, but I think
I'm just talking only ditches.
It's kind of like the
In the
generator,
fields.
right? You know, well, it's a wheeled machine, honestly, Peter, and a month like April, I bet you the New Holland would get stuck out in the mud if it was out behind Hopkins, because it's not tracked either. So,
It's got 6-foot tires, all-wheel drive.
yeah,
I barely doubt it would get stuck. Well, but like you said, who would be going out in the fields in April?
yeah.
So, thanks, Andy, for checking in on that. And I knew we had some questions, and thank you for reaching out and getting some more information, so you were able to answer those.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
That's great.
If you still want to reach out to Scott, if that isn't sufficient, I mean, you can certainly.
I mean, if we're still using it for doing, if we're still, because it costs $10,000 a month, and to digging a hole, it costs about $2,000 a day when it comes to an excavator digging out and fixing a pipe. So when you're mowing the lawns, okay, you know, if it breaks, you get a $200,000 machine that can do snow plowing and do the fields. But for renting a machine, it's $10,000 a month. And we're using this excavator for, you know, doing limbs, we're, you know, digging holes. So
Well,
that was just my gripe of what my thoughts are, and that's it.
I mean, I certainly understand the owning versus rental thing, but it's kind of like a backup generator for a water supply. When we have to put water out there, we gotta do it now, and that's why we need a backup generator. When we have to dig a ditch because, because a pipe broke, the Vector truck's been out nearly every day for the
Yeah,
past
so-
month. I mean, that's a $500,000 piece of vehicle. We're, as a municipality, we have the responsibility to the taxpayers that when there's an emergency, we can respond. And mowing lawns is not an emergency, but digging ditches to get at water pipes and providing water to the town, to me, those are emergencies.
Yeah.
And those are stuff that shouldn't be, kept under a tarp somewhere.
And the
Yeah.
businesses, as a business owner, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I don't have all the details that Andy had, but I can tell you that Scott did contact me when that main broke near the Chili's site in the morning when they started working on it. And then contacted me on Friday afternoon when I was driving home from work and told me that the guy who owns Chili's came out and thanked him and said, this would normally, I'd be shut down for 2 days and would have crushed me. And he was shut down for 5 hours
Yeah,
instead.
that would have probably cost him tens of thousands of dollars. easily.
They had it fixed by 4 o'clock. so
Exactly.
he could
Yeah, they
get
were
to
open
the
for
dinner.
dinner.
And that's reduction in taxes, because that's meals tax we wouldn't be receiving.
Very true.
And
Wonder-
the voters have individually voted on these items.
Yep.
Vac truck,
Yeah.
the excavator,
Right.
those were voted on.
Yep. So, the last item, I think, is just the library. Mike, do you have any updates on that for us?
Yeah, so the positive thing is that you'll all hopefully get an in-person update on it, because we're gonna do an update, and I'm gonna bring in John from Gale at the August 6th select board meeting, and that's one of the dates that we're gonna do the buy board.
Okay.
Yes, he did. What's his function?
John was hired by the library to do the original report with the cuttings of the roof and tell us what the damage was, and then the step further to do kind of a cost analysis on a full repair of the roof. So we'll have him come in and do just a summary of what that is. Ultimately, where we're at right now is there's a couple of different things that we have to measure. One of them is essentially the cost of potential repairs, and those can be broken up into a couple of different items. One of them could be a full roof repair at $1 million or whatever that cost is, and again, John has that all in his report, or identifying the problem areas and repairing the problem areas, and moving forward with that, and measuring that against the cost of potential litigation and finding fault in how these things happen. That is a much more murky, dirty, as Linda can tell you as an attorney, and difficult process to be able to place blame and have it stick based upon the cost of the actual litigation and what your return is going to be.
Okay.
So we'll get an update on that. That's pretty much what you're gonna hear at the meeting with some numbers. John will have some numbers on costs and things like that. And then ultimately, it'll be a discussion between Select Board, FinCom, and library trustees to kind of decide the direction on to proceed. Lawsuits are risky, and ultimately, our town council has gone through all the contracts, every piece of paper that we can get in our possession. And, you know, we know what we're gonna know, and it's a matter of kind of determining how far down that road we wanna travel.
Okay, so we'll hear about it more then.
Yep.
Great, so, the last thing I wanted to ask, is there anything else that we want on the agenda for next meeting? I know that we have to add in, Linda, you said we're gonna do, end of year
same.
budgets, end of year transfers.
Transfers, yes, we'll.
We'll have to add that,
Yep.
I had one thing I wanted to add.
yeah,
I got a letter from, I think everybody, did you get the letter from Hadley Media?
Email.
I got
Yes.
the email,
Mhm.
and I wondered whether we could discuss, because it just came, so it's in 24 hours or 48 hours, right?
Mhm.
Is it okay to talk about it?
uh,
I just thought
You
the
mean new
finance
business?
committee, yeah, it's a new business. I just thought the
Yeah.
finance committee ought to send a letter in support of this.
oh,
The legislation.
Yeah, the legislation, I think coming from the finance committee. I don't know whether any of us have time to go and do an in-person, but whether that would, have big impact, but I think at least a letter signed by the committee, and we only have till
What-
the 14th, so
14th,
So it is emergency.
it is,
Yeah, but
Okay.
Sounds like you can do it.
yeah.
I
Is
think
that
that would be a
something we
good
have to
thing.
vote on? Or we just,
Well, somebody's gonna, if it's coming officially from us, I think we should, if you had a chance to read it, it's to change to give us a way to get revenue to make up for the fact that the original revenue stream for these entities in the towns and cities was based on people's cable bill. The fact that you had cable in your house. Now, because of it, technology's changed, now everybody just wants internet, so they're not paying for cable television. They're doing internet and then streaming services, so they're actually getting what they got before in a different way. But there was no, because of the way laws are written, technically, you're getting what you did before, but you're not getting charged a fee to go back to the towns and cities to cover the cost of these public meeting coverages, sports events and other things, and as a communication for emergencies and so on.
Yep.
This is a great service for us. It makes us able to have public meetings in a way that not only do we have them for people to watch now, but they can also watch them later. So people who don't have the time because of other obligations to watch something but would like to be informed, have a way to go back and look at it on television, watch it again through YouTube, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
make a motion?
All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we support this through a letter written and signed either by the
I don't
chair.
remember seeing any emails. Is this something
From
that?
Alex.
It's from Alex.
sent an
Oh,
email.
I sent it to the finance committee members who I had emails for.
Okay.
Oh, sorry,
I was
Peter.
gonna say.
Here.
I'll send it
I
to
didn't
you.
get it.
Yeah.
I will forward
Good
it.
luck.
Okay,
Just
great.
vote yes.
Yeah, I will forward it
Yeah.
on. It's just, Alex is really good at keeping up. He's always looking to see how he can
It's a bill,
raise more revenue.
Right. It's finally
Yeah.
come forward, and it's
Can
been
you
something that's
Can you
been,
forward that to me?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
it's a bill that helps the town generate more revenue.
I mean, I'd like to read it before I vote on it, so if you guys, but I'm, only one of
So-
four here.
Essentially,
Here, type in your.
it's essentially, so if you remember your old cable bill, or if you still have
Yeah,
cable,
yeah.
A certain percentage would come out of your
Sure.
cable bill. Pretty much applying the same thing to the streaming services that
What,
Netflix and
what
did.
Paul was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much
So
all
that-
it is.
Okay, and then, hold on.
So what does it recommend for a course of action?
That we support it. We're just telling
We're
our
clear that
legislative, please
What
support
I just said now,
this.
that this is an important service to our town and that it needs the new revenue source.
The bill
So it
would-
needs a new revenue source, but it's not identified.
No, the bill would basically include your ISP bill. So you have Spectrum, just
Yeah.
like all of us.
Yeah.
So that bill, that
So the
payment-
internet bill would go up instead of the.
No, the internet bill would then be.
Type
would
in your
then-
address, it'll
would
forward
then-
to you.
Would then be used to calculate the reimbursement that would go to Hadley Media.
I'm there.
Are you in already? Good, well, I
Just
wasn't sure,
wouldn't come out
so.
of your internet bill, it'll come out of your
No, I
streaming
didn't have
bill.
your.
Streaming bill.
Streaming bill.
That's where it'll come out of.
Streaming bill, I'm sorry.
Yep, you're good.
She like had
And
it.
Alec, and Hadley Media is an enterprise fund, and ultimately in looking where the budget stands because of the revenue shortages, FY '27 will be the last full year in which he'll be able to afford to run the services. We'll get part into FY '28, but won't be able to make it the whole way through without new revenue.
Have you looked into, which we had spoken about before, about when it comes to basketball games, baseball games, or whatever, having a sponsorship of businesses help,
I think you're outside of,
you know,
no, is this outside of the?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, we can't talk about
Yeah,
that.
Okay.
probably
It's
not.
peripheral.
Okay.
Peripheral,
All right.
yeah.
We'll talk more
No, no
about
problem.
Hadley Media
I just figured, you
Put
know,
on-
the helping of, you know, something like
next
this.
meeting.
Yeah, and send me
Yeah.
all the questions you have before we talk about it, so I can come more prepared.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry about that. I just
Yeah.
didn't know. when-
Just
Now, can
Trying
we
to
go
stay
back
careful.
one step? When it comes to the library, when it comes to this meeting on August 6th, is it going to be discussed as to how we got to the point of the roof situation? Or is it going to just be, this is what we'd have to do to fix it and not find out why it actually failed in the first place? Or is that still the litigation things? It's still the fushy
That's part of the
water?
litigation. I think John will be able to talk a little bit about it, but he has not been tasked with providing a professional opinion as to fault, so to speak.
Right,
So
because,
he can say, there is a high likelihood that the leaks in this area are due to design problems, which would point to one person.
right,
Or due to, instead, you know, there's a high probability that the leaks in this area are due to
installation issues, and it's on that.
things like
Okay, I got
So
you.
He'll have to be very careful as to how he words things.
Right,
But
okay.
if you ask pointed, specific questions about things like that, he actually did a really good job
Yeah.
of giving us an idea of where the
Because,
issues are.
that's another thing that we paid for, to be asking taxpayers to pay for something that we paid for.
Yep.
To raise taxes because of
Right.
defects. Let's
Yeah.
just call them defects or whatever's wrong. Issues, exactly, which is,
There's a crazy amount of, they're actually working for another town, I forget what he said, but another town right now on another library roof replacement. I don't know what it is, but there's like an epidemic of library roofs that are failing. And were done improperly, not like
maybe.
they're aging out, just something to do with the roof
the
itself.
design and
A long time
how
ago,
they're
there was,
designing
There
it.
was a shingle manufacturing problem. I'm not saying this is related at all.
Yeah.
But way back when, there was, there was a plant that was laminating them improperly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Northampton put a copper roof on their fire department. I think it was copper,
Mhm.
metal roof, and it was leaking. The
This-
new firehouse back in,
I don't want to
20
get
years ago.
too specific, but this one has something to do with the switching of the metal roof design to a hot roof design with shingles on it situation. So
Invented.
Non-vented.
Non-
All right, so I know that Andy and Peter might not have read it, but do we want to just still, we have a few of us that have read it, that we want to send that?
Yeah, that's right, we have a vote here, so,
Did you
I
want-
made a motion, it was seconded, yes?
Second.
We've
Okay,
had
a motion,
discussion.
yep,
All right, you wanna call?
okay,
vote?
all in favor? Aye,
Aye.
aye, and, against or abstain?
Abstain.
Okay, so
Right.
that
So,
passes.
yep, we have three,
So you and I
4,
can-
and 2 abstain.
You and I can talk about a draft or something?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, yep, you're welcome. So is there anything else that,
My motion.
your
I'll
motion?
make a motion. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, so all in favor to adjourn? Aye.